Hello, my name is Kayla Thomas, and I am an HR advisor with TPC Vision. Our Vision team provides HR managed services to support the needs of our clients. We have put together the following slides to explain telecommuting during the COVID-19 pandemic. We want to thank you for taking the time to listen to our webinar today. We are here to support you as we all work through these times together. This recording is being done on March 31st, 2020. So please note that if you are listening to this at a later date, that the information outlined in the presentation may be updated. Please visit our website to reference the most up-to-date information regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. As a legal disclaimer, this communication and any accompanying documents are intended for educational and informational purposes only. While we hope that you will learn a lot today, we are not attorneys, and the information should not be construed as legal advice. If you are seeking legal advice, you are encouraged to consult an attorney. The purpose of today's presentation is to explain the do's, don'ts, and best practices for implementing telecommuting as a result of the COVID-19 crisis. The components that we are going to review today include 1. Define temporary and permanent telework. 2. Review the do's and don'ts of implementing telework. 3. Discuss the best practices for implementing telework. And 4. We will also have a brief Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Now, let's look at a few definitions. 1. Temporary telework. The definition of temporary telework is the intent of this expectation is to address certain situations where the employee is retaining in a residence in the commuting area for the regular work site, but is temporarily unable to report to the regular work site for reason beyond the employee's control. Now, During this COVID-19 crisis, many of your telework employees are probably falling under this temporary telework category. In other words, they aren't necessarily always able to work from home, and typically, if this pandemic and crisis hadn't broke out, they would not be working from home. That is why it is a temporary arrangement. Now, on the other hand, now let's talk about a few of the do's and the don'ts in telecommuting arrangements. First of all, let's talk about what you should do. As an employer, you should implement a teleworking policy into your handbook or as a separate policy that outlines the following information. You want to make sure that your timekeeping procedures for non-exempt employees are included, the expectations regarding work hours and overtime, also information about rest and lunch breaks, particularly in states where these breaks or rest periods are required. You'll want to touch on data security requirements, the prerequisites for the use of personal devices for business purposes. You'll want to talk about the accommodation request procedures, your expectations for conduct, reimbursement of business-related expenses, particularly in states such as California and Illinois that have statutes regarding it. So for example, this could be reimbursements for paper if they're printing a lot of documents related to work. Or maybe it's a reimbursement for their Wi-Fi if they are using or required to use a high-speed internet connection to be able to perform their job. It could be office supplies if they have to use certain office supplies to be able to get their work done. So you're just going to want to make sure that you have all of those details as they specifically relate to your company outlined in your policy. And then also you'll want to touch on any state-specific obligations related to employees working remotely. And again, these can vary depending on each state, so make sure that you check on your specific state requirements. Now you're also going to want to implement a telecommuting remote work agreement. Okay, so this can be a temporary or a permanent agreement. Even if you are planning to just allow your employees to telecommute during this COVID-19 crisis on a temporary basis, we still recommend that you implement a temporary agreement so that you are, covering yourself and your organization under that agreement. And again, you'll be able to do that and change the wording for both temporary and permanent arrangements, because that wording will vary a little bit. Now, let's move on to some of the don'ts, things that you shouldn't do when implementing telecommuting arrangements. First, you don't want to forget to create a telework protocol. So, you're going to want to outline all of the guidelines and kind of your company's specific protocol for the telecommuting arrangement. Also, don't forget to have your employees sign a personal device acceptable use agreement if applicable. Now, this could be that the employee is maybe using their personal laptop to, work from home on, especially during these temporary arrangements. So it could be that you're allowing your employee to use their personal cell phone to, let's say, check email or, make phone calls on behalf of the business while they're working in this temporary telecommuting arrangement. So just keep those things in mind and consider implementing that personal device acceptable use agreement if you are going to have employees using their personal devices to conduct business-related work. Now, also, try not to forget to create a telework daily or weekly agenda for employees. This is great for keeping employees on track and making sure that they are productive while they are working at home and they don't have, direct supervision over their work duties. So, create kind of a daily agenda or a document where they can track all of the work that they've done, or, set up goals and tasks that they need to do for that particular day or week. Also, don't forget to consider data security measures and ensure that employees are trained in basic cybersecurity. With employees telecommuting or working from home, they may be at risk for certain data security breaches. Okay, so you want to make sure that they are trained on those cybersecurity prevention methods. And then also just make sure that, if you guys have a VPN within your organization or something to that effect, that you are protecting your proprietary and confidential business information from, anyone else in that household or that work location that they're, telecommuting from, as well as, any hackers that may try to get into your system whenever it's not on that, protected network. So just talk to your IT department and keep those things in mind. Now, you also want to don't allow employees to feel like they are socially isolated by the arrangement. Working from home can sometimes be lonely, and especially, during this quarantine and this whole crazy pandemic, people can definitely start to feel isolated if they aren't around, their coworkers or other individuals. So just make sure that you're trying to do things to, incorporate teamwork and, virtual connection if you are having those employees work remotely and not face to face with each other. Also, make sure that you don't allow employees to decrease their productivity just because they are not in the workplace environment. Of course, this is probably one of the biggest concerns for most employers. You want to make sure that, just because they are working at home, that they are just as productive as they would be if they were to come into the office. It obviously depends on the type of worker that you have, but, some employees actually report that they are more productive working at home than when they're actually in the office. So, just make sure you monitor that and keep those things in mind. Also, don't forget to require that your non-exempt employees clock in and out and record all of the time that they work. Okay? This is important for your exempt employees as well, but especially non-exempt employees, so that you are able to accurately calculate that overtime. Again, those procedures and expectations regarding working hours and overtime and clocking in and out or recording time should all be included in your teleworking policy, or at the very least, included in your teleworking protocol. So just make sure that those expectations are clear and employees know what to expect. All right, now let's take a look at some of the considerations for telework. So just a few things to keep in mind and to consider whenever you are implementing telework or temporary or permanent telework arrangements. The first thing you might want to consider is can the duties and the task of the job be completed at another location in the same fashion as the office? Okay, so obviously this is not going to be applicable to all jobs and all of your employees, so just consider that whenever you're making these decisions. Also consider, could the task reasonably be updated so that they can be done at another location while meeting the needs of the company? Okay, so is that job available to be able to do that work at another location or at home and still meet the needs of the company? If an employee teleworks, would there be an increase in work for other employees? You might want to consider, can staff meetings be attended remotely? Does the employee access specialized or confidential data or information? And what technology systems or software are required to be able to complete the job accurately? So just keep those few things in mind whenever you are considering what positions would qualify to be able to telework. Now let's talk about actually leading these virtual teams. So of course, if you're not used to actually leading virtual teams or telecommuting, and your team is used to being in person, obviously the adjustment to telecommuting can be kind of challenging. So here's just a few things to keep in mind. First, make sure that you come up with a project management strategy, especially as the manager, supervisor, leader. This is really important. Use tools that encourage communications. So, obviously everyone has a cell phone. Call your employees. Use instant messaging through maybe Microsoft Teams or, any type of chat that you can just instantly chat with your team. Check in, but don't micromanage. This is especially important for supervisors and managers who aren't used to having employees work remotely. You obviously want to check in and make sure to see that your employees are on track, but you also don't want to be so, invested in that you're micromanaging their work. Now, also remember that out of sight isn't out of mind when it comes to praise. So just because you're not in person and you're virtually communicating doesn't mean that you can't still offer that positive feedback and praise to your employees. So still encourage them and compliment them whenever they do a good job. And then also make sure that you ask for employee feedback. So, a lot of times it's just working as a team and getting feedback from, each employee as to what's working and what's not. That way you can make changes and adjustments if necessary. All right, so here are just a few helpful tips for managers and supervisors. First, establish clear goals. Make sure that you establish clear goals and responsibilities for your team members. Use the software for tracking team progress and encourage transparency within your virtual team. So, obviously a lot of virtual teams will use project management trackers or project tracker solutions to be able to kind of keep track of their work and see where everything is at in the progress. So this is really great, especially if you plan to be a long-term virtual team. Make sure that you collaborate and communicate. Remote work can become isolating without regular communication, so make sure that you utilize communication tools to make it easier to stay connected to one another. Have regular meetings. Just because you're not in person doesn't mean that you can't have, staff meetings or regular meetings virtually. So, frequent meetings allow for collaboration and build a routine. Regular meeting times improve team efficiency. So, maybe have a staff meeting every week or every other week, whatever works well with your schedule, just to make sure that everyone stays on track and is on the same page. Try to be available as much as possible. Whether you regularly check in with your team members or respond to emails timely, being available as much as possible is extremely important, especially if you have, employees working different schedules and they need your approval or your feedback to be able to, continue their work activities. So just try to be available as much as possible. Now for your employees. These tips are kind of especially important for employees who are not maybe used to teleworking or are just temporarily teleworking due to this COVID-19 crisis. So just a few tips here that you might want to share with your employees or at least outline for them to make their telework arrangement, more successful. So make sure that you define your workspace. So, establish a workspace that is free from distraction, whether that's just a home office or just a designated area in the house that you can work from. Make sure that you communicate your schedule. especially with your team members and your supervisors, and make sure to keep your calendar up to date so people know, when you're available and when you're not. Again, use technology to stay connected. So communicate with those team members and customers what phone number to utilize. So especially if you guys have a business line that people normally call, make sure that if there's not a connection from your business line to your cell phone, that you guys communicate as to what number they need to contact you at. Maybe utilize instant messaging and emails to communicate as needed. And then implement any collaboration tools or instant messaging tools for, file sharing or video conferencing as well. Make sure that you manage the virtual team effectively. So make sure as the manager and the supervisor to determine and outline the team's objectives, set and maintain those expectations, and then identify your team's technology toolkit. You're also going to want to make sure that you set daily goals to track your team's progress. This is super important, again, especially for those teams that aren't used to working virtually. But you'll want to start each day by completing the daily goals section of your telework daily agenda if you guys have one of those or begin to implement it. And then you're also going to want to make sure that you communicate with your team if you need to adjust your telework plan. And remember, again, to schedule breaks and personal time. Just because you're not at the office doesn't mean that you need to work through your lunch or, skip your breaks that you would normally take at the office. So make sure you schedule in those regular breaks during your regular times to kind of rejuvenate and, increase your productivity. Also, if you need to attend a personal matter outside of regular breaks or lunches, make sure that this is pre-arranged with your leader, supervisor, manager, etc. And then try to avoid social media and checking personal email throughout the workday. Of course, this is hard to monitor and hard to enforce with your employees, but try to remind them to stay focused and, make sure that they have plenty to do and, track all of the work that they get done as well. All right, now here are just a few helpful tips for video conferencing. We talked about, throughout the presentation that video conferencing is a great way to kind of replace that face-to-face communication. So, seeing each other via video conference, you can still, communicate, see the body language and those facial expressions. So just a few tips here regarding video conferencing. Make sure that your cameras are on. Well-lit faces are more engaging in personal conversations. Make sure that you avoid distractions. Again, make sure you're in that quiet workspace and join those video conferences from a place where you can focus on the actual conference. Mute yourself. This one is super important for those of you who have done video conferences, especially with large groups. This is super important. Make sure that you mute yourself when you're not speaking so that the other listeners and the presenter do not get any feedback or background noise from your microphone. Make sure that you include the link. So whenever you send out that calendar invitation or invite people to the video conference, make sure that you add the link into your video conference in the meeting invitation and in the agenda if applicable. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Make sure that, before you join, or if you're using like a new system or something like that, make sure that you check your system in advance and test out to make sure that your microphone and your speakers work. And then, if you need help, ask IT or whoever your contact is to help you get all of that technology set up and working. Alrighty, now a few sample telework guidelines here below. I'm not going to read through all of these because you guys do have access to the slides. If you're watching this on the YouTube channel or on the YouTube video, you can go back to our website and actually download the slides right below the video, so you guys will have access to all of these guidelines. But just a few to kind of point out here that are kind of important. Make sure that your employees maintain confidentiality by working in a private location in their home that is away from other individuals. Especially if there's a lot of other people in the household that are there while they're working or teleworking. Make sure that the specific job duties in the assignments that are authorized to be conducted at the alternate work site are either the same or different, and if they're different, make sure that you outline those expectations and duties. Make sure that you just outline again all of the kind of basic things that you would normally outline in your policies and everything like that if they were working from your office. So just a few things here. For example, where do they report work-related injuries? Who's responsible for maintaining that work environment? How is the work equipment related, or how do they use that equipment, and whose equipment do they use, etc. So all of those little details that we've kind of talked about a little bit, just make sure that those are outlined somewhere, whether that's in the guidelines and the packet that you give them for telework and your policy. Just keep these things in mind and make sure that they're all included in your communications to your employees. All right, now we are going to move into the question and answer session of this presentation. So we've gathered some frequently asked questions and kind of typed out some of our recommendations and the answers. So question number 1, how do I know my employees are really working at home? This is a huge one. Obviously, many employers have this fear or question this whenever they implement these telework arrangements. So some supervisors express concern that when their employees are teleworking, they will not be able to monitor that employee's work effort, but when approached correctly, supervisors discover that they are better able to monitor the work by shifting the focus from how much work the employee looks like he or she is accomplishing to how much he or she is actually accomplishing. By focusing on the work product instead of the work activity, many supervisors find that they are better able to communicate clear expectations to their employees. The resulting agreement on job expectation often leads to increases in employee productivity and job satisfaction. So obviously this is not a one-size-fits-all answer, but just a few points to highlight there. Sometimes working at home, your employees actually may be more productive, and it may be a little bit easier for you to actually monitor what work they are getting done in those telecommuting arrangements. Question number 2, do employees have the right to telework during the COVID-19 pandemic? No, they don't have to telework during the COVID-19 pandemic. Telework is not a universal employee benefit or employee right, unless the employee is subject to any applicable union agreement. Management decides whether the employee can work off-site, depending on the nature of the position and the characteristics of the employee. Now, keep in mind that management does have the right to end an employee's use of the telework option if, for example, the employee's performance declines or if the arrangement no longer meets the needs of the organization. However, please note that if an employee requests emergency leave under the FFCRA, they are able to work from home. They must do so as long as their job duties allow. So, you may have certain employees who are able to work from home, and they will be required to do so under those emergency leaves, as we talked about in the first overview of the FFCRA. All right, question number 3. How can a supervisor monitor work performance when the employee is not physically present? All right, so managers can measure what the employee produces by examining the product or results of the employee's efforts. It is also helpful to use project schedules, key milestones, regular status reports, and team reviews. Supervisors may call employees who are working at home. So really it's up to the supervisor or manager to be able to set up those, strategies or criteria or agendas to be able to kind of monitor that work performance for their team. All right, question number 4. What are some of the issues that teleworkers should be aware of? A lot of these you guys probably already know, but one of the probably main ones is coping with interruptions and distractions. So oftentimes friends, neighbors, and employee members, family members do not realize that a teleworker is working, and they may try to interrupt them or distract them, and it may be unwelcome to the worker. So, teleworkers must learn to keep interruptions to a small minimum. Working long hours. So teleworkers need to be careful that they do not slip into workaholism. Some personality types have the tendency to work longer hours than usual when they are teleworking because they can focus so well on their work. Teleworkers should give careful consideration to the balance or integration of their work and their personal lives to avoid burnout. Obviously, it's easier to start working whenever your computer or your office is at your house and you have the capability to just go over there and start working or logging on and doing something. So just keep that in mind, especially for your exempt employees. Exercising self-control. If teleworkers find themselves procrastinating, they should evaluate their work habits and make necessary changes to ensure productivity. Designating space. A designated work area is recommended for teleworking. A separate workspace may mean fewer distractions or interruptions and a higher level of discipline and organization. Gaining support. A family or supervisor's attitude may sometimes be detrimental to a telework arrangement. Teleworkers must work to gain the support and understanding of those around them. Question number 5. How does teleworking affect morale and productivity among workers who continue to work in the office? This is an interesting one because it's something, that some people don't normally think of. But when a telework program is implemented properly and the teleworker selection process is clear and objective, any possible negative effects on the morale and productivity of non-teleworkers can be minimized. It is important to clearly communicate to all employees that teleworkers are selected on the basis of their job functions and their work performance characteristics. It is also critical that an employee's telework arrangement does not increase other employees' workloads. When management does not handle the transition carefully, objectively, and transparently, jealousy and resentment can arise from non-teleworkers who mistakenly believe that teleworkers are really not working. In other instances, coworkers are not interested in teleworking but respect those who do. Managers need to ensure that all employees are treated equitably when it comes to expectations and performance, regardless of where they are working. As with any organizational change or shift, communication is the key to success. So obviously, some employees are going to be jealous if, their job functions aren't able to be completed at home or they don't qualify to telework. So just make sure that you keep those thoughts in mind whenever you are implementing your teleworking arrangements. So question number 6, which employees are ideal for teleworking? The ideal teleworker is self-motivated, well-organized, a problem solver, and someone who can work independently with minimal supervision. Successful teleworkers have a high degree of job skill and knowledge and strong time management skills. Teleworkers like working at home or away from the office for at least part of the week and do not mind working alone. Teleworking is not ideal or desirable for every employee. So this is really important to remember when you are classifying which positions or determining which positions are eligible to telework, because again, not every employee is going to be successful in this type of a work arrangement. So just keep that in mind. What does teleworking offer the manager or the supervisor? Well, a successful telework program can actually improve organizational efficiency, raise the quality and quantity of work, boost employee morale and job satisfaction, and lower your employee turnover rate. In addition, the enhanced communication that a telework program fosters can further develop your own skills as a manager. Question number 8. What should employers do if teleworking does not work? This is important because, again, it's important to remember that it's not always going to work with every position or, necessarily every employee. So, again, sometimes teleworking does not work. If a teleworker's quality of work declines, treat it as you would any regular performance issue. Review the telework agreement and give your employee a chance to improve. The employee's telework agreement should include a clause stating that the telecommuting arrangement may be canceled for operational or performance issues. So just make sure that that provision is included in that agreement, and then, move forward with that performance process, or, if they need to go on a performance improvement plan, move forward with that, and just keep those things in mind. All right, I want to thank you guys so much for joining us today at this recorded webinar. If you guys have any questions about telecommuting or teleworking, make sure to contact TPC Vision with those questions. Again, we do have a questions section under our website, under the frequently asked questions section. So if you have any specific questions, please feel free to submit those there to us. For pricing regarding your TPC Vision services, if you guys are interested in kind of learning more about the services that our Vision team offers, please make sure to contact your sales representative or click the Contact Us button on our website. Again, we do have a few sample policies that we offer, and we offer to customize to our clients as they relate to telecommuting, such as those policies and agreements that we talked about throughout the webinar. So if you're interested in that, again, contact your sales representative or contact us on the website. Alright, again, thank you guys so much for your attention today, and I appreciate you listening to us today to talk about telecommuting. Thank you guys. Have a great day.